Tracy and Guy.
Hello.
Oh. I was just asking you guys if you could hear me. Well, welcome to Fathers, Mothers, and Family Show, hosted by me, a longtime friend, and we are here to talk about a particular friend that we both know. Can you go ahead and tell us about him?
Can we mention him by name?
Only by Garrett.
Only by Garrett. Okay, so that's yes. I understand that PSU does not allow us to, I guess, refer to people by their certain names, I guess.
Full names.
Involved in a lawsuit or something? Or
yes. Yes, they're very picky about that over here. Sorry.
That's okay. I met Garrett Smith back in 2014. I was actually hired by his father as interim CEO of several of his businesses that he owns. One of the problems that we had initially found that his father wanted me to look into was the disappearance of approximately $250,000 in a escrow account that Garrett had set up for the purchase of some property in California. Once we started inquiring into the status of that, we started getting some feedback and some heat for snooping around in places we shouldn't have been snooping. Garrett himself is a world-renowned mechanical engineer. He had a patent-pending process for the process that converts cow manure into renewable natural gas. And so, anyways, I don't know where to go with this from right now.
Well, you could probably start about his parents and.
Yeah, Garrett comes.
That was the direction we wanted to go.
Garrett, at the time that Guy began to work for him, we had met his parents first and knew that Garrett had gone through a difficult separation, but didn't know the details of that. And when we did actually meet Garrett, it turns out he was dealing with a matter in jail. He expected to be released very soon.
Yeah.
And you can go ahead.
Okay, there you go. Thank you for bringing me back. Tracy wore me. Sometimes I get caught up into the details. Garrett Smith was wrongfully convicted of attempted murder and assault of his wife. Both are crimes that did not occur. So that wrongful conviction back in December of 2014 earned him a 12-year sentence. He's currently incarcerated up at Stafford Creek Penitentiary there in Aberdeen by Grays Harbor.
Before you go on, Guy.
And we were there to watch the whole thing unfold. And even though we did what we could to help him to notify friends and family, investigators that were working on this, who really didn't want to hear from us, the system was able to wrongfully convict Garrett, and it happens every day.
Now, wasn't there a detective that was involved in this and tried to get him convicted?
Yep. Yeah, the detective, the infamous Vancouver police detective that shall not be named. Yes, we have proof that she had altered evidence. The case made the news back in March of 2014, 9 months after the incident from June 2nd of 2013, the night of the alleged assault, and the 911 call that was made. Prior to that, during the attack by his now estranged wife, she was badgering him and pestering him to call his cell phone because she had hit it. And he had called the cell phone a number of times between 11 p.m. and 11:10 p.m., probably about 10 times.
Wow.
During that same time span, phone records, the logs indicate that he had 2 calls, incoming calls from the cell phone that he was trying to find. when he called it back that last time, his 10th time out, the voicemail picked up. And during that inadvertent voicemail message is what the title in the Columbian was called. You could hear the argument and the swearing going on in the background. Garrett was very distraught. At least that's the impression I got from listening to that voice message. And his wife was screaming and babbling incoherent things, screaming for the dog. The prosecution alleged that was Garrett assaulting his wife, and it couldn't be anything further from the truth. He's looking for his phone. He has his handheld cordless home phone that he was attempting to call his iPhone with to try and locate it through by listening for the ring. And so finally, after I guess probably about a 3-minute recording, Garrett had enough. He needed his phone because he had a business meeting the next morning that he wanted to have that.
Wasn't she drunk during this time?
He was drunk, yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a big part of this.
Several hours later at the hospital, her intoxication level was 3 times the legal limit.
Yeah.
And that was...
It was 0.192.
Wow.
Blood alcohol content. That was an hour after the 911 call.
But didn't they admit her not for the supposedly attack? They admitted her for alcohol poisoning. Is that correct?
Correct. They did admit her for alcohol poisoning, being that she was so intoxicated.
And he was sober.
He was sober, yeah. He was asleep when she assaulted him and attacked him.
And this had become a common occurrence, according to Garrett and some family members, that she had done this before, where he had to leave, and that's what he was trying to do that night. He was trying to leave.
Now, before we all get started, he has a Asperger's, right?
Yes. While Garrett was incarcerated for 18 months leading up to trial, just over a year after his incarceration at the Clark County Jail, he was diagnosed as having high-functioning autism, formerly known as Asperger's syndrome.
But
he was found on the autism spectrum. He's when you say a brilliant mechanical engineer, he really is brilliant.
Well, I was going to say, aren't the people sometimes with Asperger's, they're actually geniuses, aren't they?
Yeah. They have problems with Asperger's that they don't see social danger like you or I would.
Okay.
They don't recognize. And as far as where he's at on the spectrum, he I don't want to say I don't want to say anything bad or make it look like I'm saying anything bad about autism, but he is on the upper end where he's athletic. He's more outgoing. It's just that his personality is very very direct.
I know.
He uses vocabulary that some people think that he may come across as being somewhat snobbish or whatnot, but I never got that from him. But when he was diagnosed, or when we first let him know that we thought that possibly he could have it, and we sent him some paperwork, we didn't hear from him for a couple of days, and when he called back, because he would have to call in from the jail, we couldn't call him. He thanked us and said it really helped to fill some voids in his life. And he was 45 years old at the time. Or just turned 46. He's going to turn 50 this month. He's been incarcerated for 5 years. It's been a 5-year nightmare for him.
Well, now, the time that he was in jail, is that counted towards his time of the 12 years?
Yeah. You get credit for time served.
That's good.
One of the hardest things, I think, in this, and with us being so close to the story and staying so close to Garrett through this, and I act as his ADA advocate, helping him with the things that when he has trouble accessing, the justice system. I've been able to help with that. But the Court of Appeals, on October 4th, 2016, we were waiting for a decision on his appeal, his original appeal, and the Court of Appeals in Tacoma overturned his conviction. And that happened to be International Wrongful Conviction Day.
Yeah, the irony.
It was very ironic, and the thing about it is that we didn't realize at the time, and you get into the workings of the justice system and you start to realize this, that, and most people automatically assume if a conviction is overturned, then that person is going to get out, days, weeks, maybe a month later. That's not how it works. When somebody's conviction is overturned, there's still another 2 to 3 year process of the prosecution challenging that decision. And in Garrett's case, the prosecution did challenge it to the Supreme Court, Washington Supreme Court level. They accepted the case on discretionary review, and they re-overturned his reversal.
Wow.
But they did give him some advice because what came out in that case was a lot of the fraudulent, the falsified evidence and the problems, the potential misconduct in the case, and it wasn't appropriately before the Washington Supreme Court, so they have instructed him to file back in the Court of Appeals too, a personal restraint petition.
Yeah. The thing that he appealed on, it's too bad we can't use names because he had a very famous appeal attorney working on his case.
You can say the attorney's...
one issue.
You can say...
The issue was raised on the voicemail message. The inadvertent message that was left, that 3-minute call, is a private phone call. And in Washington, you must have two-party consent. And that is what the basis of the overturn was at the Court of Appeals, was that there was no consent. However, the Washington Supreme Court saw it as, no, it wasn't a conversation that was being recorded. They were just recording utterances and things like that. So that was the crux of the appeal, the reversal, and then the re-reversal by the Washington Supreme Court, which... we totally disagreed with.
Well, actually, I was going to say the voicemail was actually altered by the detective, correct?
Yes. During this time, we've had the voicemail analyzed, not professionally, but by somebody who, semi-professional, I guess you can call it, an audio tech. And what it appeared to be was that there were, for the way he described it, would be cutting and splicing, where there would be no tones and tones in the background. And some of the sounds that were being heard sounded like it was somebody typing on a keyboard. So he prepared a 8-page report that was submitted as part of his next appeal,
okay.
Which is habeas corpus here in Washington. He should have just started with, there's so many things that, he should have just started with that, the fact that it was tampered with, but for whatever reason, the attorneys didn't do it.
Well, also, I was going to mention the so-called wife. When she was in the hospital, didn't she sign everything over to herself?
Yes, she was, according to the records in court, she was allegedly in a coma, couldn't walk, yet she was able to transfer over all of work with Garrett's business partners until they realized that it was a scam and they wouldn't work with her anymore. She transferred all of his assets to her own shell account and created her own business. She had a plan. That's very clear. Yeah,
she had actually a power of attorney set up while, I guess 6 months before Garrett was arrested on this, and which gave her power over everything. She had access to his business bank accounts that she drained.
Wow.
It's probably important to mention that they had only been married a year and a half. Garrett had gone through a difficult divorce with his wife of 17 years, who he had four
boys.
Who he has 4 boys with, 2 adult boys and 2 who are still in high school.
Yeah, another thing I wanted to mention is his so-called wife, Garrett, is also a friend of mine. He mentioned to me, which I was kind of surprised, that he may not be legally married because she has what's called Munchausen syndrome. Is that correct?
Well, we don't know about the diagnosis. I wouldn't doubt it. She may not have been lawfully able to marry Garrett because she was a part of a special needs trust. She would have had to have approval by the trustee of that trust to marry.
There's a question about her competence and ability to make decisions for herself.
Yeah, it's really crazy.
So technically, when she signed all that stuff over to herself, it was actually illegal.
Right, yeah. Yeah, car titles.
Everything.
Yeah, 4 cars. Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah, so what's going on with him now?
Well, he's remotivated. You know, he struggles with Asperger's, but he has really learned to deal with it, and it's been especially a struggle in prison. But he's found the motivation to really go to town on filing
the PRP.
He's got 3 separate PRPs, personal restraint petitions that I think they're going to include in one that deals with all the fraud in the case, which is what should have been brought up to begin with. But on the outside of that, in federal court, Washington and Oregon, because his business was in Oregon, he has also taken to task the lawyers, the detectives, all the people who were involved in his wrongful conviction. So he has filed federal suits, which is something you normally wouldn't do, I don't think, until you're
out, till you're acquitted, really.
Yeah.
Not while you're incarcerated. And maybe we haven't explained this, but Garrett is filing all of his own court cases, motions for appeal and complaints from prison, a very difficult place to do such things. It's been difficult for him to get paper, for instance. Friends and family, we put money on his accounts there so he can, get the necessary supplies. But, the way that, he is very, he is something else. He's really focused, and, he's constantly on the phone calling people and writing letters and sending out these communications from jail. People who are innocent don't act this way.
No, he gave me, as a matter of fact, I'm a friend of his, and he just recently sent me something where he wants somebody to write a letter and sign it and submit it to Tacoma, I think. And I forgot what it was, but he sent that to me just recently. And then he has sent me some stuff where he wants me to, I think it's to write letters for him, help him write letters, but I need to look up court cases. So.
Well, we would love to help him bring more attention to this. Tracy and I put together, it's mostly Tracy's, a website called Garrett's Voice. Part of us helping Garrett during the early times when he was incarcerated, when we first got to know him, I was falsely arrested.
Whatever happened to that?
Trying to help him. I currently have a federal lawsuit against the city of Vancouver and the same infamous detective. It just takes time, but because we were very vocal about the way he was being treated, and the arrest basically boiled down to me sending a link to a blog, which was Garrett's Voice, garrettsvoice.com. And the information in there, I was arrested for cyberstalking, felony cyberstalking, and didn't even come close to qualifying for cyberstalking. There was no lewd or lascivious content.
Or name calling or anything like that?
Yeah, nothing like that. And plus, I never had communicated with his wife or sent her anything. I sent it to Garrett's biological children, 2 boys who were adults in Oregon. And but definitely with the detective doing what she did to that recording, didn't want us on the trail to find this out. And fortunately, we've had some, I guess you can call it luck along the way, when we discovered Garrett's discovery that was part of his personal belongings that he had no way to access. If you want to talk about that?
Yeah, an interesting piece of this happened, and as we were watching the case take place, and we knew that there were things that were wrong. His defense attorney was working against him and working with the prosecution. They had isolated Garrett. There were times when we couldn't talk to him on the phone. He couldn't get through to us. So there were a lot of things that were very concerning as we started to dig up evidence that there was something not going right about his case. This was before trial. Well, about 2 weeks before, or within a month, his trial was early December. Right before Thanksgiving that year, he asked his counsel to withdraw, and
They never created a defense for him.
No, there was no defense.
General denial.
And they were refusing to bring in important evidence. So that was very concerning to Garrett and to his family and to us. But when Garrett went pro se, he was going to try to defend himself. The prosecutor brought all the evidence discovery in manila envelopes. It was 20 CDs and a 2-gigabyte flash drive with all the evidence in his case. It had gone on for 18 months. The police reports, everything.
DNA evidence.
Well, he couldn't look at any of the evidence because he didn't have a CD player, and they have regulations against them in the jail, and so he asked the judge to be provided one, and the judge refused, so he had to hire his attorney back, who was not serving him at all. But in the meantime, whoever left that discovery with him forgot to come and get it, and when Garrett went to prison, he gave us authorization to pick up his belongings and store them until he's released. We couldn't even look at his belongings for a month and a half because it was too devastating that he'd actually been convicted. But when we began to go through the big plastic bag at the bottom, and I was putting everything in boxes to be stored, in the bottom we found these manila envelopes, and they were 10 gigabytes of unredacted discovery, and it was from that we had all confirmation that Garrett's case was a sham, because those records, that evidence was what was hidden.
A lot of it can be considered exculpatory.
Yeah, I was thinking about, here we're talking about, evidence that is hidden, and he got wrongfully convicted. It almost sounds like something that we both know about is Ray Spencer's case.
Absolutely, and Daniel Holtzclaw's case.
Yes.
Yeah, really, it's relying upon the testimony of the detectives, and their testimony including written reports that are false. And fortunately, with Dr. Spencer, he had Dr. Ray Spencer. He had his. I guess the children were. The recordings of the interviews by the prosecutor were on back then videotape, and those videotapes, I guess, resurfaced.
Yeah, they were in the
conviction or something like that, and it took another 8 or 9 years for it to go through the process. He was in jail for almost 20 years.
Yeah, he said it was 20 years, and he said that what he told me is that the evidence was the videos were in the detective's garage.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said somehow, she must have felt the heat coming on over these years that she finally turned him over to, I'm not sure who, but,
We talked to Ray or communicate to Ray about that. We wondered, why would she pull what type of heat was there? We thought that maybe she was, I don't know.
Well, I think it has something to do with the lawsuit that he had against her.
He didn't even know. I mean, this was something that she just came forward with.
Yeah.
Is the way I understand it. And it's almost like she came forward out of spite.
Yeah. And so he got out. And as a matter of fact, he just bought a house. And he just went into the house today to look at it, to see what's left that they left behind, and then my son and I are going to fly down and see him. So
that'll be nice.
Yeah, we're going to maybe spend a few days with them, and so we're waiting until I move before we fly down. So
It was a safe trip. through all this that we've learned by being impacted by the criminal justice system the way we have, as innocent bystanders being swept into it. Tracy and I were in our late 40s when all this happened to us, and we'd never had any run-ins with the law, none whatsoever. Never been arrested. I had a speeding ticket, one speeding ticket over the last 30 years. And I wasn't even going that fast, but to come into this to be falsely accused, and then to see Garrett get railroaded, the things that we learned from this are the criminal justice system is fallible, so fallible it's corrupt.
I think it's corrupt anywhere.
It is.
Yes.
It is anywhere. In particular with law enforcement, they have these policies and procedures, and you think that, with the number of times you hear about police having negative confrontations with people, that they would follow their policies and procedures. Well, they don't. In fact, the Vancouver Police Department is missing significant sections of policy and procedures. And all that means is if there's no policy and procedure, then they don't have to adhere to it. In Garrett's case, it was the collection of evidence, digital evidence, and evidence that had been tampered with. Of course, there's no policy on that. But the detective should not have had her grubby mitts on his phone to begin with.
Well, as this particular detective is not just doing this to Garrett's case. She's done it to other cases, correct?
Yes.
And where she's from, I forgot where she's from. She did the same. I think she did the same thing over there, and then she transferred to here. But what I don't understand is if she's doing this, it's going to cost Clark County and Vancouver and the state of Washington money.
You would think that, but the government agencies, the government entities here are willing to fight it to limit their liability. This really all comes down to, this misconduct comes down to risk management on whether or not they want to pay it, whether or not they want to admit fault, and they're willing to fight it at taxpayer cost and expense.
And that's not right.
That's not right, but that's just the way it is. And, even with the Attorney General of the state of Washington or Oregon, they represent the agencies and entities and employees of the state. They don't, they represent the people of the state when they're filing a class action lawsuit or consumer protection lawsuit. But other than that, Tracy and I went to the Washington Attorney General and requested help and investigation into the Clark County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. And the response to us was they would represent the Clark County Prosecuting Attorney's Office in any lawsuit.
I was going to say, in Ray's case, he got $6.75 million, but the point is, we, the taxpayers, are paying that.
Yep.
And to me, that's not right, because then the teachers aren't getting enough money, the roads aren't getting done, and certain things are being cut in schools and so forth, because that money is being paid for a lawsuit.
Well, there are insurance companies involved, and the city and the county have different policies, as does the state, that insure against such liability. And that's why they'll see it fought. In Ray's case, they were, I think at one point, they tried to deny that the two detectives that helped to frame Ray were not acting as part of their...
said they weren't their responsibility.
It wasn't their responsibility because that wasn't their job description to do what they did. That's the length that these type of things go to. It's just crazy. It's not right or wrong. It's what they can get away with, and it's common practice in these agencies. So
in Garrett's case, it's kind of like, what's next? What's he doing next besides falling?
Right now he has his second appeal. This one is called the personal restraint petition. It's formerly known as the habeas corpus.
Oh, okay.
And basically, he's bringing forward information that was not presented at trial. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
New information or...
New information. We let the appellate court and the state Supreme Court know about the fraudulent, about the fabricated voicemail message. And they did nothing. They passed on the merits. And so now he has to go through the process of raising the issue again, in complaint, through the appeal process. And so this is his, his last chance. And it's too bad because he had, his attorneys didn't do him justice on his appeal. I guess we can just leave it at that.
Yeah, I noticed that he's done how many? 20 lawsuits in state and federal?
Yeah, he's been busy. And he's, the amazing thing is he have copies there? Because I think he's handwritten.
He's handwritten them, the ones I received.
Yeah, he handwrites the copies.
Yeah, that's the copy. He's
here's something.
He's sending you a copy when he's not doing this in triplicate or photocopy, and he's doing it by hand, multiple copies of the same document. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And if you look at his documents, one thing I thought was amazing is you don't see any misspellings and no scratching out. Everything's just done fluidly.
I know. Because he sends
when Garrett was first in Clark County Jail, or maybe it was when he first went to prison, he he wrote a novel and a sequel, and
Garrett was wrongfully convicted on December the 4th? Or
3rd.
December 3rd, 2014. And they held him in the Clark County Jail for almost 2 more months before they sentenced him on January 30th.
Wow.
And during that time period, the time he was shipped out in early February, he had written a novel. It was a 438-page handwritten novel on sheets of paper that he would collect while he was there in jail, from people sending him stuff and from him asking from other people. And I had that manuscript. It was really something. That was part of his. No, he mailed that to me.
Yes.
He mailed that to me. That's right. Instead of leaving it with his belongings. But anyways, I photocopied it and scanned it, rather. Excuse me. It's something else.
Have you sent it to publishers?
First book of a trilogy that he's writing called Vulnerable.
But have you sent it to publishers and see what happens?
Oh, no.
We passed it on to his brother, who is a journalist, and was going to work with it.
Yeah, he's a sports writer. It needs to be typed up and presented. It's, handwritten on front and back of the page, different size sheets. It was quite the conglomeration of
what he could get
written on it. I'm not doing it justice. It's very interesting to see somebody with such high functioning autism, be able to show that type of work. When we were talking business while he was incarcerated there at the Clark County Jail, he would constantly send me plans and ideas and things. I mean, that he'd be writing out like these flow charts and putting together, presentations and ideas. And his mind is constantly on.
Yeah, I noticed. He sent me some of that too.
Yeah.
I'm like looking at it going, what?
It's interesting. I remember the first time I'd met him, and it was through a jail phone call. I'd sent him a letter, and he responded. And I had him on speakerphone, and Tracy was in the background. I didn't introduce Tracy. I just wanted her to hear, who he was about. And after a 20-minute phone call, he probably spoke 18 minutes of it.
Wow.
Clearly and fluidly. And I told Tracy, I go, wow, he's seemed very naive as far as what was happening to him, because he was so anxious to talk to somebody about, his businesses, because he wanted to know statuses and things like that, which I was in the process of giving him and his father. I told Tracy, he seemed like he's very naive, but things I had noticed about him in conversing with him, he didn't swear. He didn't use any swear words, and you think that would be unusual from somebody that was in jail. I remember my call to Tracy when I was falsely arrested. I think I had a few swear words. And the other thing with speaking with him is that he does not stammer. He doesn't use or filler words. his thought process is very linear and concise.
Yeah, I noticed.
I wish I had.
I mean, he's wrote me many letters, and I never really paid any attention to that.
Yeah, has he called you?
No, he hasn't yet, but he did give me a flyer to do that JPay for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to set up your own phone account.
And I did. So
Yeah, it's actually a pretty easy and effective way to communicate, the JPay system.
Yeah, he sent it. I kind of guessed what he wanted because he didn't say. He just wrote something in the back of it, sent me something, to have people write letters with and send it to Tacoma. He didn't say that he wanted me to do this JPay. I just that's why I asked you if he does it, because he didn't say anything, and I kind of figured that's what he wanted.
Yeah. One of the things we haven't mentioned also about Garrett is that he was very spiritual. His Christian belief helped to form his worldview. He constantly quote scripture.
I know.
When he end us correspondence, I think on every single one. And he was even mocked by the prosecutor during pretrial hearings about that. And it was really, it's unbelievable.
Mocked by his own defense attorney, too.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to see the way that our agencies, our government is treating people's right to, freely express themselves. And as if it's, some sort of a mental disorder or problem that needs to be dealt with. I talked to him about that too. And his parents, when Tracy and I would visit and talk to him, we got to know him better. When he was 16 years old, I guess he could speak 3 languages.
Wow.
I asked him about the scripture aspect of him. I go, "Do you have a Bible there?" And he goes, "No." He's memorized, several versions. He doesn't know them by heart, but he's pretty well enough to
he
bring
puts
them off. I mean, it just wow. It's these little things, when anybody has a chance to ever speak to him, we'll find that about him. He's really an amazing individuul.
Well, I'll find out soon.
Yeah, we got a lot of mad respect for that man. He's living a nightmare through this wrongful conviction.
Oh, how I got in touch with him is I knew about him from Garrett's Voice, and I sent him a Christmas card, and in the Christmas card I put a note. And I looked up where he was, and I sent it, and I don't know how much longer it was, but then I got a letter from him thanking me for sending him a Christmas card, and that's how it started with us.
Mary, you're so sweet.
I'm
so glad.
Appreciate
Oh, absolutely. He's turning 50 on the 19th. So.
Well, I'm not too far ahead of him. I think all of us are. But, I did that to Holtzclaw, too, and I never got anything back. But I did hear that Holtzclaw had many, overwhelming Christmas cards, so he couldn't answer to all of them. So I kind of said, okay. But I was really surprised with Garrett answering me back.
He'll have his day. Justice will come. And it's just unfortunate that he has to fight these battles that he should not have been fighting.